Hello, everybody. I believe we are live. Yes, we are. Welcome to Acumen Academy's inaugural pop-up panel. We're so excited to welcome you and to have you here. So as the virtual room fills up, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know what part of the world you're joining in from. I imagine we'll have people from all over the world, so we'd love to see where you are and make some connections in the chat. My name is Danielle Sutton, and I am the content animator for Acumen Academy. If you aren't familiar, which you must be to some extent, Acumen Academy is the world's school for social change, a university reimagined for a world that needs all of us. Our mission is to unleash a new generation of social innovators and leaders with the determination and grit to build a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world. We serve a community of social innovators and builders who are willing to embrace this challenge of solving the world's toughest problems. And today I am so excited because we have the pleasure of welcoming 4 of these amazing social innovators to you on this panel to discuss their perspectives on social entrepreneurship, moral leadership, and their personal stories of creating change. And we happen to bring together these social innovators who all happen to have a connection within education as well. So this will be a theme of today's discussion, I'm sure. A few housekeeping notes just as we get started. There will be a replay, so if you are registered and if you are here, you will get the link to the replay after the fact. So you can watch your email for that link if you want to pop back and rewatch anything. And we'll also have time to take a few questions at the end. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat as we go throughout the discussion. I will keep an eye on them and we'll cover as many as we can at the end. I hope we have some time to take a few. We may not get to them all, but please ask away. And yeah, so let's get going. I mentioned we've brought 4 social innovators from Acumen Academy's community, and you can see their beautiful faces on the screen. I actually had a nice little summary slide with all of their info, which it doesn't appear to be loading for us. So we will just look at their faces while we introduce you. Daniela Gheorghe is the SME Finance Lead at African Management Institute. She's also a school scholar, and she's based in UK and Kenya. Ashish Shrivastava, I practiced this, Ashish, and I'm messing it up. Shrivastava, I'll let you correct us when you introduce yourself.
That's perfectly fine.
Founder and director of the Shiksharth Trust, a nonprofit educational research initiative focused on education in rural and tribal India, and based in central India, and an Acumen Fellow from 2015. Awesome to have you here. Mario Gutierrez, Chief Growth Officer with the School Frontiers and founder of MEMA Social Innovations, based in Philadelphia, US. And Wainright Acquoi, co-founder and CEO of Tribe, a social enterprise edutech incubator working with young people in Liberia, originally from Liberia in West Africa and currently based in Boca Raton, Florida, USA. Okay, so with that, let's get started with our first question. My intros were very brief, so I'm going to let you introduce yourselves with this question. And that is, why have you chosen to do this work, and what is the impact you're hoping to make? So Mario, if you can kick us off.
Sure. So, well, thank you for having me. First off, this is a great opportunity. In choosing my work, I think the thing that I found was just doing the right thing, right? That's where I came from, and that's where my thoughts come from. And for me, that's the education sector. I was a classroom teacher. I saw things that were just not right, things that were not fair in the education system. And I knew that those things needed to change, and we needed to figure out better ways to do them. For me, where I'm hoping to make the most impact is a level playing field, right? So that students will have similar ways to gain success, no matter where they are, no matter what they are doing, no matter their wealth, where everyone will have a fair and equal opportunity to get started. And for me, education just is the building block for so many other things. So that's where I come from. Here in Philly, we definitely are working at it, and we've seen some good things. So we're hoping to continue that.
Ashish? Oh, I think you're muted still.
I'm really sorry. Yeah. So this is a new portal tool for me. I'm used to Zoom, and so it's just missed. Yeah. So I didn't choose what I do. It's pure destiny. I used to work with corporate and left my job and started traveling across India, uh, across rural India, and landed up in this part of the country, which is a conflict zone. It's in central India. It's called Sukma, and if I have to give you an idea about what I why I do this, so I mean, just sharing a classroom experience. In a classroom, we had 53 children. 47 out of the 53 children, a fourth grade classroom. So basically, 7 to 8 AS of age. 47 out of 53 children had sketched the scene of a combat situation or a war situation when asked to sketch at free will. So usually you would expect a 7, 8 year old child to sketch either a scenery or a bat or a ball or a flower, and 47 had sketched the scene of a combat situation. So all these children have been affected because of conflict and because of the war. And there are around 12 million children in India, mostly in tribal areas, who are witnessing violence or who are witnessing pain, and who are growing up as adults with whose exposure is limited beyond violence and conflict. So, I mean, as an impact, what we are trying to see is a child who evolves into an adult, is a child who experiences empathy, compassion, contextual learning opportunities, and becomes a peaceful, compassionate, and learned citizens in the future. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Wainright?
Sure. Thank you, Danielle. So I think for me, like she said, it's really an issue of destiny. And so just a quick background, my country, Liberia, experienced a 14-year civil crisis, sometime between 1989 to 2003. And during that period, I mean, I was born during the middle of that crisis, so I really didn't live to see the entirety. But I remember as a child growing up with my parents, we had to constantly fly from the sounds of bullets, because you never knew when you were going to get hit by one. And, several years after the end of that crisis, we now see that a major devastation from the crisis is the brokenness in a lot of the systems, and particularly in education. And so growing up and really experiencing how bad the education system was, which wasn't a conscious, effort at the time, I realized that, well, back then, several years ago, we were running from the sounds of bullets. But at some point now, we are running from the sounds of, the brokenness of the system that is actually not, we're not trying to protect our lives from the crisis, but now we're trying to save our future because education is just so bad that it doesn't prepare young people to succeed in the workforce. And so as I grew up, where I am right now, I think I wouldn't have been on this path if it wasn't for the education I received. And this education was not solely based on what I learned in school. It was because from a young age in high school, I was given opportunities by people who offered me mentorship, who exposed me to the real world skills that I wouldn't have otherwise experienced as a student in high school. And I think just growing up with my friends and seeing how we all had big dreams and big visions for the future and just wanting to do so much more with our lives. And where I am right now, looking back several years later, I see that there is a huge disparity between where I am and my friends. And the only difference is not because I'm way smarter or I'm better up. It's just because I was given opportunities to learn things that were not taught in school. And so I didn't grow up into the traditional education system. And I think I just want to create ecosystems where many young people would not grow up having dreams and not realizing these dreams because they can have the opportunities. And so the impact I just hope to make is really ensuring that we are building an education system that is actually giving people options to be entrepreneurs, option to be storytellers, option to be innovators, option to be employees, option to be academics, and not really, hindering this prospect of people's future because the education system is affording them the opportunity.
Daniela?
I have to say that I'm already, I kind of feel when Mario, Ashish, and Wayne are talking, it reminds me why we are in this community together, that energy and that passion. So thank you for bringing this the context back. And I think just to follow on the same note, unlike Ashish and Wayne, I'm choosing to do what I'm doing. And I'm usually very intentional about what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. The SME finance work that I'm right now working on with the African Management Institute based in Kenya is really because I started understanding that there is no difference between a social business, which I tried to scale at one point, and an SME, a small and medium enterprise. There is no difference, perhaps maybe in terms of aspirations for growth, there is a difference there. But in terms of the ability to support the economy, the ability to offer jobs, the ability to offer equal opportunities, there is no real difference between a social enterprise and a small business. And I'm doing what I'm doing because after COVID and the pandemic, we've seen that the role of SMEs in emerging markets is just crucial to sustaining economies. And I'm choosing to work in emerging markets because I think that's where the future growth is from, and that's where the excitement and the young people and the ideas and the growth are coming from. And what really drives me in the choices that I made within my career of about 12 years of experience has been this idea of, as Wayne said, of offering people the ability to see the potential that is there in them and making them aware of that. And, you know, it's just such a blessing when someone realizes that they have potential and opportunity because of the work that you've been doing, whether they're kids or adults or elderly people. And yeah, so this is really what kind of drives me every day, to see that people suddenly have hope and that we are supporting them, not only giving them hope, but actually giving them realistic pathways to take that hope to action.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniela. So we'll move on to the next question now, which is, we'll have Mario start us off. And it is, what are the contributing factors that you feel have led to the rise of social entrepreneurship in recent years, or kind of this dedication of people like yourselves to create change in this way?
Yeah, so for me, it's really three things. Number one is the visibility of people being able to now, with social media, see things that are wrong right away, being able to identify problems and see them real time in real life, where, you know, something that's happening right down the street you may not have any idea about, but once that's out in the open now, people are seeing issues and reacting to those issues. I think that's big. I think the acceptance of social entrepreneurship is something too, because, you know, 20 years ago, you know, you probably wouldn't have seen a social entrepreneurship class in an, you know, MBA program. And now that's everywhere. You know, I think you can get degrees in it, et cetera. And I think that's huge, because that opened up, you know, kind of gave a credibility to this you know, sector we're in. And I mean, it also opened it up funding. I mean, that's the third thing, is just huge amounts of money are now available. And you don't have to be, you know, and no offense to the small nonprofits, because I was part of one forever. You know, you don't have to be just kind of struggling to get by. You can really reimagine what this looks like, and really make some great gains, because you have some people behind you that are going to be willing to fund what you're doing, especially if you're doing good things and you show a success rate. So I think that for me, it's those three. I'm sure there's tons of other stuff, but that's where I see it.
Thanks, Mario. Yeah, that's great. Ashish, you're in quite a different context in central India. What have you seen as the contributing factors to kind of bring about this type of work in more visibility?
I agree to what Mario just said. I mean, at least the social media, it has helped us understand the magnitude the intensity of the problem beyond our localities. So that has given an exposure. It's not just a child who is not able to study in my neighborhood. That child is just an example. The problem is much larger. The social media, the access to information is what helps you understand the complexity of the problem. I also believe that with the economy, the global economy getting more liberal, we have kind of realized the interdependence that we have within different groups of society. So I know that if somebody is hungry, is sleeping hungry, if somebody is unemployed, that is not just a problem of a different world. It's all interdependent, and I need to do something about it. So that is one thing that realization has come up. And because again, because of the liberal economies, the middle class has got the courage, the risk appetite to pursue something in social entrepreneurship. Otherwise, earlier it was all restricted to the elite and the people who had funds. Now somebody from a middle class background and a lower middle class background think of starting a business, think of risking his career, risking his or her profession. So that has happened. uh, I also think that a lot of ideas have also come because we have started to develop business models, business development models, problem solving models for bottom of the pyramid. So earlier we were short of ideas, and now we have models. We have banking, we have microfinance, we have skill development, and we are coming up with different ideas. So these kind of exposures have really given uh, an opportunity to people pursue social entrepreneurship.
Thanks, Ashish. Yes, those are some of the driving forces that have brought it more to the forefront around the world in many regions, as we have quite a diverse representation here today as well. Now to talk about the flip side, what are parts of the current conversation, and Daniela, we'll have you start us off on this one. What are the current conversation around social entrepreneurship? What do you feel might be lacking understanding or even being fully left out, that is something you see, having been in the field for a while, that, and in different roles, you know, as an entrepreneur and as an entrepreneur, what do we need to start talking about more?
I wrote down 5 elements. I'm not sure if you want the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then maybe I can go into them. But I like that structure. So first of all, we are talking about social entrepreneurship as if it's sort of a unicorn business that a lot of impact investors are searching for. This is problem number 1, when in reality there are a lot of zebras, right, not unicorns, out there in around the world. Second, we are talking about, we are separating the small and medium enterprise problems and funding and the social enterprise problems and funding. And I think that's not necessarily the right way to do it. I think governments and funders globally can rethink this balance better. Third, there's a sort of a trend around social entrepreneurship more and more, and I think a lot of the audience here might or might not be familiar with all the details of what does it mean, and I think it's just, you know, very attractive for a lot of people. But what we are not talking about is the cost of the social mission. There are costs in creating change, cost in measuring impact that a normal traditional business doesn't have. Fourthly, we are not talking a lot about the risks of burnt out of a lot of social entrepreneurs and founders. We are not talking about the mental pressure and the stress. We are just talking about the passion, and that's what you see in most of the news and articles. Third and fifth, we don't be fooled by the kind of support that you think the system has. Social entrepreneurship is still not mainstream, and I learned that the hard way. And I thought it's going to be, I would get more support, much more support than I actually got. Funders are not running to find out who you are. If you're running a business, you need to struggle a lot in many ways, and yeah, there is less support than actually appears to be.
Thanks, Daniela. Good points. Wainright, do you have notes to add on what we should be talking about more in this conversation?
Sure. I think Danielle already struck several important points. I'm not sure I can live up to her expectation, but I'll try. I think, it's very important points, and I wouldn't want to reemphasize. I will reemphasize them, but not want to be redundant in mentioning them. But I think to add a few is that we oftentimes think social entrepreneurship is this linear approach or linear path, but it's really a multifaceted approach, right? And it's because unlike a traditional business where you say, right, my sole focus is to maximize profit in most cases, in social entrepreneurship is really seeing what problem am I addressing, right? And so in this instance, it really depends on the kind of problem you're addressing that requires what approach or what model that you're going to adapt for your venture. So if it requires you to rather sell a product and generate revenue, but having impact at the core of your business model, that's important. If it requires you to be a nonprofit in a sense, because you're not concerned about profit making, you're concerned about the impact, I think it's also an approach to it. And like she said, impact investors or investors in general are just looking at, social entrepreneurship as just a linear path that is either black or white. But there are a lot of gray areas and there are a lot of zebras than just one unicorn in the ecosystem, as Daniel mentioned earlier. And the second thing is, people don't see impact as a product, but I do think impact is a product. And so oftentimes we have, traditional businesses come here. For example, you go to, other places, whether it's Silicon Valley or other investment areas, and somebody comes with a business idea and say, well, we're going to, our market valuation is 2.5 billion. We're going to sell this product to these people. But in essence, there is no evidence to prove that. They are assumptions. When a social entrepreneur comes and say, I want to run this venture, here is my estimate, here are the assumptions, here's how I want to test this. They say, oh no, you have to reach a certain level before we can invest in you, or you have to show certain things to ensure that you're valid enough or valuable. And in true essence, these business ideas, right, there's an equal chance of success as much as failure, and they get all the investment to go and test these ideas with no form of structure whatsoever. In social entrepreneurship, they think, well, you're a nonprofit, or you're not supposed to go the traditional profit route, or you're not going to invest into the product or the impact and not look at the operations. But you can have the kind of impact you desire, right? If you don't have the people, the team, the resources to invest into this. So I think just really rethinking that model of how we approach the work is that get the idea, test it, validate it before thinking about scaling is really as important than just looking at, oh, show me how you make an impact or reach a certain level before I make this investment. So I think that's just something I wanted to mention.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks so much. So the next question, we're going to get a little bit more into the theme of moral leadership, which is something that is even perhaps less known as an idea than social entrepreneurship to some people. But I wanted to direct this question at Ashish and Mario, because both of you have been more deeply involved in some of Acumen's opportunities, like the fellowship and also some leadership work, Mario, where, this idea of moral leadership has come, I guess, into the conversation as practitioners, as builders. And so what does the practice of moral leadership mean to you? And, how does it relate to social entrepreneurship? How do you see these ideas as connected or not? So Ashish, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So in fact, I came to hear about the phrase moral leadership at Acumen itself. And since then it has been kind of my guiding light. I don't remember the exact definitions that I had read, but the inferences that I made out of it for social entrepreneurship, and which I have been following and I kind of push it within the organization as well, is first that I learned is the proximity to the problem. It is very important to have proximity to the problem. You need to have at least had some experience of the pain or the problem yourself to be actually authentic, relate to it in an authentic way. The second one is persistence and courage is a crucial thing. It's not a 1 day thing, it's not a 1 month thing. It will take years, and one needs to have persistence. And I rate it much higher than optimism. It's okay to be pessimist sometimes, it's okay to be cynical sometimes, but it is very crucial to be persistent. The third one that I loved the most and I learned at Acumen was the importance of the idea. I mean, you have to look at things that are beyond yourself, beyond myself. So, I mean, so the idea is more important than the organization. If I have to close down my organization today, knowing that the purpose can still be addressed, I would have no issues with that. So the idea is more important than the organization. So it also empowers you to make your choices in a completely uh, honest way. If you're willing to let go of the organization or the institutions for the cause, for the idea that you're working on. Then these two things that I also learned as part of moral leadership was I focus a lot on contextualization. So I say that ability to contextualize is a key skill in social entrepreneurship. One size doesn't fit all. And to be able to do that, to be able to contextualize your solution, it is very important to be brilliant at listening, be brilliant at observing things, adapting, connecting to people, and that is how moral leadership kind of. And the last point is, I mean, moving out of comfort zone, not just the jargons, physically, emotionally, intellectually. Are we willing to move out of the comfort zone? Yeah. These
Well
are
said. A lot of difficult things, maybe easier said than done, but well said. Mario, what does the idea of moral leadership mean to you? How does it connect into your social entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, so I'm with Ashish on a lot of these. I mean, I think the key one that he mentioned early was this concept of empathy and really being able to understand, what's really happening and feel it, right? I think that's part of it, and I think that leads to where your business head goes, right? That's where that's headed, and I think that's really an interesting concept where those two pieces intersect. I think the concept of the risk is huge in both of them, and I think that is, again, this wonderful intersection that can completely be chaos and everything else, but if it's all going right, it's just this wonderful piece that all kind of connects everything. There's so many pieces to this, but I happen to have this book very close by, not to not to advertise, but this is wonderful. And for real, I think that everything in the Moral Revolution book is super interesting, and I think that it is really key to what what all of this means, right? It's all intertwining vines of things that we can all really get behind, and we can really feel what we're doing. And as social entrepreneurs, I think you have to have that ethical compass. You got to know that there's going to be some tough decisions that you're going to make, and it's not always going to be pretty. There's a lot there. I think there's a lot there, and there's a lot more there that we can do to really mix those two things up.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mario. So this next question will be for Daniela and Wayne, and it's maybe a tough one, but important to ask, I think, in terms of bringing to light, speaking to that idea of tough decisions and courage and persistence. So Danielle, we'll start with you. Was there a time when you found yourself putting the market or financial potential over the impact? And if so, would you have done anything differently if you had a chance to redo it? Oh, I think you're muted still.
Is it good now?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I was smiling hearing the question because I think, and to link back to the question that on moral leadership, I think I'm at a stage where I've already failed doing taking an enterprise to scale. 4 years burning out, and then understanding that I need to grow myself in order to grow the company. And I feel that I didn't put the financial and the market first, and that's why I failed. So, and of course there were other reasons, but I think that there is always a risk of mission drift. Like if you have an impact-driven mission and you're trying to be a business, right, in the full sense, you are risking to go away from the impact that you want to reach, and because the money are coming, right? But I believe that social entrepreneurship is when you have found a business model that the more profit you can make, the more impact you automatically make. That's a real business model. If this direct proportionate growth doesn't happen on both profit and both impact, then it's not a real business. That is a big impact business. It's just I don't know, maybe you're trying to do CSR, corporate social responsibility or something. So in my case, I think that trying to build a business is not bad. Trying to build a business first as an impact entrepreneur is not bad. It's actually excellent. And measuring the impact that you want to have is the missing piece that a normal traditional entrepreneur would not do, but we should do. So putting the problem at the center, as Wayne was saying, is core for any entrepreneur, but measuring the impact is only here. So if you're true about the impact that we want to achieve, I think it will be, it'll be a gain. In my case, I didn't really map out how I can scale a model. So that's why it was very hard for us to go in front of investors and to say, this is how we are going to make money in the next 5 years. And this is how we are going to scale in the next 5 years, 10x, yeah, in the number of students or clients that we are going to serve. And I think because I haven't been able to strategically do that, I feel that I put impact first, and that was also a mistake. So I'm not sure I feel comfortable answering. I'm not feeling comfortable saying that the mistake on my side is that I put the financial market first. I wish I did that, but I didn't. So here I am. I'm not sure if that answers.
No, that's perfect. I'm so glad you shared that side of the coin, and this is why we have all of you here on a panel, because I have a bias even as I create the questions, right? And it's important that we talk about the real experience and the real stories that, the failures and the learnings that you had. So thank you for bringing that up. So I'm curious, Wayne, do you have a similar perspective or a different perspective on this balance, if there needs to be one, or maybe like Daniela said, they should be one and the same on the markets and the revenue side, and how that's influenced, if you would have done anything differently or what you've learned from that?
I think in the current dispensation that's one of the big problems social entrepreneurs face, is really how do you balance an impact and a revenue model. Again, it goes back to really understanding the problem. But the challenge is that as a social entrepreneur, you may understand your problem and the impact, right? Investors that go to for funding for Tribe, they don't know what the situation is in Liberia. I know it. But everybody is driven by this, sensational aspect, or they're gravitated towards what is the global trend. Other social entrepreneurs are making profit. Why can't you show a profit model? Other social entrepreneurs are doing this. Why can't you do this? Because that's what they see. But we have to put that into context, right? What if the population I'm serving cannot afford the product? What if the people I'm serving don't require what you expect me to present to them? What if I don't need technology at this point in my work? What if I need a traditional approach because that's what the context calls for? So don't compel me to go towards what you're pushing me into. That's what makes most social enterprises fail, because we are mostly constrained by limited resources, and so we are mostly driven towards investors or funders' perception of the reality or what they want you to do. And in that case, you're compelled to do it because you think you need the resources to operate, and if you don't get the resources, you're going to die anyway. So why not try it? And was social ventures go ahead and fail. In my instance, I think I'm actually at the stage where that is a battle I'm constantly facing, and it's really important that Ashish mentioned, Mary mentioned the whole issue of moral leadership, when it comes to self-care and just empathy, because it's easy to already say, well, I don't have to do this, well, I'm going to school, I can get a job and work here. I don't have to sacrifice my life to do something that there's a very slim chance of generating revenue. And so I think that's where the courageous aspect of social entrepreneurs come in to say, well, how do I balance the market forces of impact and product? And so again, I think what needs to be done there is really a synergy among social entrepreneurs and those who are funding this initiative to really understand that we have to look at this in context. Does this require you to show me a revenue model or not? In my case, I think I've been very stubborn with my investors because everybody wants to push me towards, where's the revenue model? And I said, well, I can't guarantee anything right now because we are testing. The same way you gave a traditional business the funding to test the ideas and see whether it could work, it's the same joint. Because if I told you that this is a model that works and this is what we're going to get in 5 years, then my venture is irrelevant because there would have been that solution already existing. But the fact that this is a new model means you have to be patient. We need patient capital. You need to care as much for the people we are serving and the venture and the mission as much as you care for what is going to be the return on investment. And so I think for me, I've dedicated my life the next 10 years to proving this and testing it. And so I know that I'm going to get broke and I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to cry and I'm going to get broken. But eventually I'm going to wake up and go and test again. So until 10 years is over, I think I'm deciding to really focus on how do we sustain the impact model because it's really reimagine a system and not just trying to please some investors who are just concerned about what is my immediate return on investment. So it might be a different perspective, but I definitely believe in this model.
I love that. And that's an excellent segue into my next question as well, and which is around partnerships. So investors are a very important partner for any social enterprise if they are taking funding from an investor. So, I mean, obviously there's other partnerships as well that can be very critical to doing the system change work. So this question is for Ashish to start, and then Wayne you kind of touched on it, but I had you speaking about it again. So let me know if you want to skip. But Ashish, what role have partnerships played in growing your initiative, and what has worked well and what hasn't? What have you learned?
Yeah, so the greatest partnership that we have done, sometimes by choice, sometimes by compulsion, has been with the government. Uh, so, uh, so the advantage that it has is definitely it gives you scale. You don't have to increase your operations. You don't have to increase the number of cities you're working on. Build an excellent idea, collaborate with the government. The government is the one who can talk about scale, at least in countries like India. You can't create a parallel setup of your own. There's a limitation. So working with government, collaborating with the government uh, is the best partnership, but it has also been the most challenging one. Bureaucracy, like any other part of the world, is extremely difficult to handle. So that has been really difficult, and government's priorities are very, most of the times it's very short-sighted. So that has not really worked. So for a social enterprise, it has to be a long, far-sighted initiative. You need to have a longer vision. Mostly a government officer would be having a vision for 2 or 3 years. So which means that every time the person changes, every time the officer changes, in our case, every time the district officer, education officer changes, our whole operations go for a toss. So that is the flip side, but then the government definitely offers you the scale. Along with that, we also have had the exposure of partnering with similar organizations, peer organizations in the sector, because we work in a remote geography, so it's really difficult to get all the human resource uh, uh, with the right set of skills. We struggle with human resource or a lot because for the obvious reasons we work in a tribal area, we work in a war zone. So we have realized that partnering with peer organizations save your time first of all, and it avoids the effort that you put in reinventing the wheel. A lot of brilliant content, a lot of brilliant resources are already available, and if you're truly passionate about the cause, you would like to partner instead of becoming a competitor to a content that is already existing. I mean, something as simple as creating lesson plans for classrooms. Why should I create my lesson plans when I already have excellent lesson plans available from different organizations? So that's reinventing the wheel. It's you sometimes end up creating redundant work. So that is really crucial. And but Some of the challenges that we have faced because of that has been, first of all, one size fits all narrative. I mean, uh, you cannot be, you have to contextualize solution. You have to adapt a solution if you, even if you're partnering. So we have many a times we have faced that challenge with organizations where they are like, okay, we have this product and why don't you replicate it as it is. Like a lot of organizations reach out to us saying that we have this edtech solution, digital learning content, and why don't you collaborate with us? We're like, we don't have access to internet. It's less than 5%. Where would I give you digital content? But then that's where the discussion then doesn't go further. So that ability to contextualize, to empathize, is often missing. And also a greater threat that I have seen in partnerships as a challenge has been the willingness to lose your individual identity for a collective identity. If my organization is partnering with an XYZ organization, the whole, it's a human vulnerability where we kind of start getting into the insecurity of whose brand will be higher, or who would be getting the credit. So can we lose away our individual identities and create a collective identity? So it's a very fancy idea, great to listen, but it's very difficult to practice. But I think it's a very crucial learning that we have had with partnerships. So for us, it has been peer organizations and government who have been the most crucial for any kind of delivery on the ground.
Thanks for sharing. That's great. Wayne, do you have anything to add there about partnerships in your learning?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I see shares, a lot of very crucial points, and I was smiling when he was mentioning them. So I think one thing to note first is that as social entrepreneurs, we are solving a systematic problem, and so we can't underscore enough the importance of partnerships, because, and especially in education, right? This is not, for example, we're not just building an app that makes people to send videos across and be immediately excited or fascinated by the talents of people. This is not just a one solution fit all. It's really ensuring that how are people learning and how is education developing them to realize their full potential. And so it comes with a lot of challenges that you can't just do it all. First and foremost, when you talk about, in my case, working with especially secondary students, it's like they've all grown up to know that high school is just a place where you go to complete a requirement, or your parents want you to go there, without a full understanding that this is a place where I get to develop, right? This is the first pipeline in which my potential is realized. Because in most cases, when students leave high school and their talents or their potential are not harnessed, they lose that sense of identity to what they can do. They lose that, the courage to actually go after and explore those potential. And it's really difficult because now they're in the real world, they're exposed to everything that can make you insecure and vulnerable. They're mostly not going to go after it. But most times when people go after their potential from high school, they build that initial confidence. And so, it's really not as difficult when they already have it there. And so why I'm bringing this is to say that now, to ensure that this is a system that has been perpetrated for a long time, the traditional system, to reimagine the system requires lots of partnerships. And very key stakeholders play a very important role, from curriculum to the space you provide for these students to operate in, to the programs you're offering, to what happens after they go through these programs, who are facilitating these things, the teachers, those who are going to absorb these students, the ecosystem they're going to be a part of. These are all crucial partnerships that is an ecosystem, builder in that instance. And so I think in our role, what has helped is really ensuring that we are leveraging important partnerships from government, from our Ministry of Youth and Sports or Education Ministry, saying that it's important to not just see education as just a requirement, but it's actually a tool to develop these students. How are you supporting this in terms of policy? How are you giving up the space to work with these students? You have to work with the schools to say, how do we ensure that our curriculum can be used here? How do we reimagine the curriculums you have? How do we ensure that the students are learning? And another important stakeholder segment that I think we often overlook are parents, or besides just parents, it's just like the influencing network. So in our case, the programs we've been running recently have been mostly virtual because, all physical activities have been suspended. And one thing we did was that because these are high school students, so we leverage working with their parents so that they influence these kids to learn. And the moment we realized that the moment these parents got to understand the importance of the kinds of programs we're running and the impact it could have on these children, they were more involved and more engaged with these students, influencing them, encouraging them to be a part of the programs every time. And so I think, partnership is really is multidimensional, just looking at what impact it's going to have on the venture. And like I said, as social entrepreneurs, we're already solving an ecosystem problem. So it's really important to really connect all these stakeholders and how they play a part in supporting the idea, the model, ensuring that the benefit reach the desired target you're reaching. And also just not overlooking the impact of individuals who are just within the ecosystem that can support, whether it's through funding, encouragement, support to whoever you're working with. It's really about the people you're serving.
Excellent. Thanks, Wayne. So we'll switch gears a little bit more back to the personal stories, and we'll start, Mario, with you on this question, and that is, what was the hardest decision or action you've made in your career so far, and what have you learned from it? And then we'll have Daniela follow up.
Yeah, for me, it was having to pull the plug on a program that I absolutely loved. I'd spent 7 years building the program. And it was, we thought we had it down perfect. And, as we began to realize that we didn't quite have the funding for it anymore, and there were some really problems on the end of being able to have the intervention that we thought we were having. I don't know. It's difficult to explain without this long and entrenched story, but I think that was the toughest thing, because you put all your time and effort into this, and you do everything. And Daniela had mentioned it earlier. It's just such a hard decision to make, but on the bright side, I think you come out of it better. You've made those decisions, and you look at it, and you can look back and say, it may not be the exact reason why this failed, but I can see where we can get better the next time. And the next time we do this, it's going to be that much better, and it's going to be sustainable. And I think for me, that's the biggest learning piece is, and I've heard this before, and I'm sure everyone's probably heard this before, but sometimes you learn the most out of like the worst running businesses, et cetera, that you're involved in. And for me, that was huge. And it taught me that I was lacking in skills as well, that I needed to build up, my business skills, and as opposed to just, thinking that everything was going to be okay all the time, and that someone would pull us out. So for me, that was just torture, and I remember like the months after just like trying to figure out every possible way to keep it going. You're just like, what if we just completely burn it all down, and there's this like a tiny little, it's not even the same program anymore when you think about it at the end, and you're just doing everything, and then you realize that that was the best decision that could be made.
Opportunity cost is a real thing. It's hard to let go of, sunk cost, right? All that time that you put into it. Thanks for sharing, Mario. Daniela, do you have something to share about your hardest decision or action that you've made in your career and what you learned from it?
It's hard to go into the story without you feeling what you felt at that moment. And I think Mario summarized it. It's like hope is that the project you really work hard on is not going to die, and then you have to go, just like you go for a candle and just stop the candle. And it's heartbreaking in many ways. I was working on this project for 4 years in Bangalore, India, and I spent 3 years before in getting ready to start a venture. So I spent 7 years of my life getting ready for this project and trying to run it, and it just didn't work out. And to be honest, I think the biggest lesson that I have, and I would very warmly take and present it to everyone out there, is learn to move away faster from things that don't work, because that's how you have a chance that your project can continue and survive. We were so passionate about what we were doing, and I was so much into it day and night, really not having a life and work-life balance at all, that we didn't see when it's not working, because we were not planning for it not to work. We were planning for it to work wonderfully and scale wonderfully. So we were not having plan B, plan C, plan D, and we didn't know what it is. And if you go back to the literature of startups and you see lean and agile and quick MVP, minimum viable product, and then learning quickly, crashing it if it's not working, starting a new one, that needs to be something ingrained into the way you do work, whether it's for financial stability of the enterprise or for real impact with the people on the ground. So learn to move away fast from things that are not working and have plan B and C and D to reiterate and measure. And if you are going to build, measure, learn, yeah, continuously in a loop, you can show that to investors. And they, most probably the right ones are going to fund you just because you're doing this cycle.
Love that you brought that up. Yeah, it's again, when you're close to it, it can be hard. So I think that's one of the amazing things about being in community, right? Is we have peers who can ask pointed questions that make you think. Okay, so we'll just do our last question. The hour went by so quickly, but this is a question that I love to ask. Ashish, we'll start with you. If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice about starting your career and in social change, what would you say?
I would say that proximity to the problem is a must. Get your hands dirty. So instead of managing people, be the people, at least in the initial phase of the social change career.
Love it.
Mario.
Yeah, just do it. Just get in there and just start. Just, throw everything out and just go for it. And you'll learn from that.
Love it. Daniela, you kind of shared yours. Do you have anything else to share?
Just maybe remember to not fall in love with your idea, but fall in love with the mission and the why you're there.
Beautiful. And Wayne, you get to.
Yeah, sure. I think I would tell myself, the first thing is compassion or passion is not just enough. Competence, skills, the partnerships are equally important. And then secondly is that I will reemphasize what Danielle earlier said is be quick to get away from what's not working. I think that's been a big lesson that have really impacted my work, is really identifying what doesn't work and how can I ensure that I get closer to what works, but also bring in people who understand how to make that work for you, even if you're going to be below them, so they guide you until you get to the point where you can measure it and manage it yourself. It's really important.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing so many amazing nuggets of advice. And I have to commend all of you for being so concise as well, because that just means that we all got to learn even more. So that was wonderful. For everybody in the chat, we have about 5 minutes left. So if you'd like to ask a question, I did see a few come in. So we'll start with one of those, but feel free to post a question in the chat and we will try and get to it. There was a couple of questions that were related to measuring success and measuring impact. So I know we could get very technical on that subject, but in general, and just pop in, unmute yourself if you'd like to share. How do you define success in your social initiatives? And, do you have certain qualitative or quantitative metrics that you put at the top that are more important than the rest, or does it depend on the time or the initiative itself? What are your thoughts?
I can jump into that. I think, most times not really understanding or clearly defining success is what people term as a venture feeling, because sometimes you're quick to move, and somebody talk about shifting mission area at one of the questions, whether you're not raising revenues. But I think as you start the venture, you have to ask yourself, what is success for me? And if I don't meet this, would I be satisfied? If I impact only 2 people a year, would that make me happy? If that makes you happy, that's success for you. And then it helps you to really pace yourself towards how you're working with that venture. And so, I think it's really important to clearly define that for yourself. And that will really ensure that whether or not you're getting rejected or investors that are putting through to support your venture, it gives you a better approach to who can I go for funding? Where can I put my effort? how much do I spend my time on working on particular instances for yourself? Because at the end of the day, it's not about pleasing who is investing into the venture. It's about, are you okay? Are you happy? And are you satisfied with the work you're doing and the impact you're creating?
Anybody else like to share how you define success for yourself? Or I can ask another question that we just got from Ali in the chat. This is a good one because I think this was advice from one of you to, yeah, Mario said, jump in, just get going, right? So Ali asks, any specific advice on the best or fastest way to get going, especially considering the limitations of the pandemic? So what, could be a first step on that bigger challenge of just start and just get going?
Mario is on the spotlight.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is to, like everyone else has been talking about, is get your true mission down. What is it that you really want to do? And clearly define your mission. I think that will guide you the rest of your career, no matter what you're doing, whether it's this initial venture, whatever. If you can get that piece down, then you will have a guiding light forever. I think that's super important. Obviously, is that going to get you money for your venture? Maybe, that's the thing too. And I think that's part of it too. Again, going back, everyone was talking about partnerships as well. I mean, it's starting to build those too. Starting to build small partnerships. They don't need to be huge to begin with. Talk to people, join a community like this where you can go through some of the issues and talk, very specific about how to start a social entrepreneur enterprise in your particular sector. I think that's important too, to really understand that the sector differences will make a big impact on how you start. But yeah, my first thing is just go for the mission. Get your mission down, get it well defined, and start talking. Start getting it out there. Start finding the people who are going to connect you. And you know what? You'll find them. That's the craziest part. You'll meet someone through someone that'll end up, being able to help you out.
And I would add on that, just because it's somehow, I've heard that sometimes it's daunting for people to write down a mission for life. So perhaps start with one thing you care about and that connects to your personal experience, something that you've truly seen in your life that you felt it's unjust, maybe something that you're angry about, and try to, source the mission from that moment and remember how you felt and imagine that this is something that perhaps many people experience. So once you're more clear on which area to look at, start finding out what others are doing and just talk to people. It's such a great time to talk to people who are doing things on the ground. So feel free to just, if I care about X, who are 10 people in my LinkedIn profile community that I can connect with? And trust me, if you join COSI, Community of Social Innovators, you are going to find at least 2 people doing the same thing, yeah, at least in the sector. So talk to people who are doing the same thing and learn so that you are not doing the same mistakes again.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much for all of the amazing stories and advice and tips and insights that you shared. I really love learning from each of you personally, so I'm sure that everybody who joined us today has at least one takeaway, if not more. If you're in the chat and you'd like to share your takeaway, or at Acumen we call it your aha moment, please go ahead. I think it would be really neat to see what you're walking away with today. And in terms of next steps, you have some great advice from our panelists, and I'll also, I wouldn't be the content animator for Acumen Academy if I didn't share a link to our courses. If you would like to explore the course library, we have over 30 free courses, and there might be one in there that speaks to you, that might give you some clues or ideas for your next step. And yeah, so I think we will wrap it up there. Again, thank you all so much for being here, and all the best in the next steps of your social entrepreneurship journey. And we look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you for joining, everybody.
Thank you so much.